All right, so I recently finished up reading Elon Musk's new biography by Walter Isaacson. And while it's pretty entertaining and goes into a lot of depth about Elon's companies like SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, it also provides a lot of valuable insights. And in today's video, I wanted to share a few of those that I took away. The first big takeaway is think big and leave everything on the table in pursuit of that big, lofty vision. Now, this is definitely one that sounds cliche at the surface, but there's a lot of truth to it because not setting an ambitious target, not setting something that is probably outside of your comfort zone is, kind of selling yourself short. And in Elon Musk's case, he took it to the extreme, right? He's taking it to the extreme day in and day out, but it's a helpful tool that he uses to get his teams oriented around a goal, motivated around a big vision. And, whether he kind of manages to the expectations in the right way or not, that's up for debate, but it gets people going. Throughout the biography, one saying that Elon Musk says again and again and again is a maniacal sense of urgency is our operating principle. And this guy truly means it, right? Like, being able to kind of set these artificial deadlines, nobody's necessarily pushing him to say, we need to try and get humans to Mars, by XYZ timeline. But he thinks that, by not setting an aggressive enough timeline, that it's not going to happen unless he and his team are the ones pushing for it. And there is some truth to that. I guess it makes sense. This idea is also central to the trough of disillusionment, where on one axis, on the x-axis, you have time, and on the y-axis, you have level of commitment. And what happens is you'll start off with this big idea, this big vision, and you'll get really excited. Motivation will carry you through. And then over time, as you realize, oh man, this is pretty hard, you come down that hill, it plateaus for a bit, which is the trough, and then you come back up as you are grinding away. And then finally you plateau because finally you've realized, okay, I'm making some gains here. And so this whole concept of like pushing through, grinding through it is the thing that gets you out of this trough. So the part of the graph where you get out of that trough is called the slope of enlightenment. And this is really a critical point where you're starting to make a lot of progress and all the grinding, that's almost like stored potential, stored energy, right? That's building up and you're trying and trying. That's the point where things start to work. And for example, with Elon Musk and Tesla, Tesla was like very, very cash flow negative for a long time. And investors were, second guessing if it was actually going to work out. And Elon really had to like pull a rabbit out of his hat multiple times. Ultimately, attitude is the thing that gets you out of the trough. And Elon is so big on having the right attitude at his companies that hiring is everything to him. And so much so that in the book, he says, when hiring, look for people with the right attitude. Skills can be taught. Attitude changes require a brain transplant. I think another dimension that kind of goes unsaid here is making sure that the job or the company that you might be trying to work for is also in alignment with your attitude. And if those things are in misalignment, it can be chaotic and kind of a recipe for disaster. Now, I'm definitely guilty of having made this mistake before where I think I'm, in sync or I can kind of find my way or get motivated by what the company's doing. Or the why behind why the company even exists is not fully clear, but I say, you know what, it's fine. It's a terrible idea because having that attitude match with, again, what the rest of the company kind of believes in is really everything, and it's the thing that's going to propel you forward. There's a book called Start With Why by the author Simon Sinek, and he goes into this concept called the golden circle. We basically have like 3 or 4 concentric circles, and in the middle, there's why. And as you go further and further outside, the next ring is how and then what. And oftentimes companies are not thinking about that bullseye, what's in the middle, the why. They are really good at saying what they do. Like, for example, they sell toothbrushes, or they're really good at saying how they do it. Like, they have a differentiated product in the market that, has fine bristles and it's never been seen before. It's a new, innovative, concept in the market. But the why is fundamentally about not just making money, but why do they do this? Why are they in business? Why do they exist? And oftentimes that's about having a longer term, mindset in benefit of the customer. They really want to make an impact for the customer's lives. Like they want to make sure that no person has poor dental hygiene. And, obviously that's just a silly example, but the point is that why it should be then the key that aligns with what employees of the company or what individuals who resonate with that company, that brand. It's what that match and what that puzzle piece is often missing. And so, again, coming back to this concept of like think big and leave everything on the table, those things and these concepts, they all tie together. So another aspect of this is disruption in a given industry. And Tesla and SpaceX have been huge disruptors in both of their respective industries. There's a book by the name of The Innovators Dilemma by the author Clay Christensen. And basically the point that the author tries to make in that book is incumbents in a given market, they have to both play the role of servicing their existing customers, but at the same time, they have to find a way to almost like disrupt themselves. Otherwise, they're going to be disrupted by newcomers to the market that are more nimble and agile and can, frankly, do things and move faster than big, slow behemoths like Boeing or Ford that, they have to really think in those ways that they may get disrupted. SpaceX has been a huge disruptor in the space exploration industry. And part of that is because of the way that they get paid. It's on a performance basis versus incumbents in the industry get paid on a cost plus basis, which means that they get bloated contracts. And as Musk argues, the performance-based way has the potential to save NASA billions of dollars in the long run and really promotes innovation. And just a couple of examples of this have been the fact that SpaceX was the first private space exploration company to actually reuse rockets. Now, it seems like looking back, it's kind of crazy that rockets like don't get reused and it seems incredibly wasteful. But the fact that SpaceX was able to figure this out and reuse rockets, that's one of the big things that Musk believes in, is that if humans are to become a multiplanetary species, they need to be able to be more sustainable and adopt more sustainable practices like reusing rockets. This is something that's, for example, reduced the cost of launching satellites. Another aspect of this is cost efficiency, and SpaceX is launching rockets at just a fraction of the cost of traditional government-run programs. All right, so the next one is to think of everything as a test and don't be afraid to fail and always be willing and open-minded to experiment. In the biography, Elon Musk has a saying, "It's okay to be wrong, just don't be confident and wrong." Elon is a big proponent in something called first principles, which is essentially about taking things to their base level, to their base assumptions, and then building things back up from there. And so understanding is sort of built on a base that has been vetted and tested for different assumptions. First principles thinking sounds simple in theory, but it's actually pretty complicated. So Musk has an algorithm that he actually uses. I believe it's a 5-step algorithm that's outlined in the book, where he uses this approach to employ first principles in his thinking and throughout his businesses. And there's 3 of them in particular that I found pretty interesting. The first one is to question every single requirement. And again, this comes back to the notion of getting to the root of the problem, to the base, and then building back up. For him, it's all about identify assumptions and then challenge those assumptions. And especially if they're coming from smart people, those are the most scary and the most dangerous ones, because oftentimes people are not questioning smart people. They feel that they themselves are not smart enough to challenge the authority. And so he always kind of promotes this throughout his businesses and to all of his employees. Like, always challenge those requirements that are coming from smart people and never accept requirements that are coming from just some general department like the marketing department or the finance department setting some policy, because oftentimes it's kind of thinking that's been instilled and it's long-standing. And he always says, like, find the name of the individual who came up with this policy so that we can challenge them. And it's not necessarily just about challenging for the sake of challenging, but rather like identifying this person so we can like have a clear and open and honest conversation about why they came up with this policy, how their logic was designed, and if their logic fundamentally is reasonable or not. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a cool way of thinking, and it really encourages like challenging so-called authority, and for Musk, for him too, like he encourages people to kind of challenge him on certain things, right? Because he's not necessarily like the one with all the rules in place, and he's not the smartest like in the room, if that makes sense. The second part of Musk's algorithm is to determine the most important parts of any given process and then delete the fat that's not relevant to accomplishing the goal of that particular process. So for example, in Tesla, in all the production assembly, and think about all of the supply chain involved in building electric vehicles, Elon was notorious for like cutting machines that were not needed, components, processes that were not relevant. And he would even like go around with a spray paint can and X out things, machines that were like no longer needed in the production cycle just so they could be removed. So basically his philosophy is to delete any process or part that you can. And if you're not adding back at least 10% those processes back into the mix after you've done this exercise, then you've probably not cut deep enough. And the cool thing is it gets to, what are really the most fundamental components of a process that make it like living, right? That are most important to it. So it's functional and most well optimized at the end of the day. And, for example, like at Tesla, they were maybe churning out like 2,000 cars a day, and they needed to get that production capacity all the way up to 5 or 6K per day. And by like chipping away slowly and looking at every single component of the production line, Elon and his team were able to get from that 2K a day to 6K in production capacity. And it's remarkable. And it was kind of like through this constant questioning of like, well, okay, we have this, like there's X amount of time that it takes for this part in the production cycle. How can we bring that down? Like, is this actually needed or if it's not? And ultimately it's like really worked super well for them. And the third part is to simplify and optimize. And according to Elon, this should only come after number 2, because otherwise you may be trying to simplify a process that's actually not necessary to begin with. All right, guys, so that's it. Have you read the biography? And if so, I would love to hear your take on it. And what are some of the things that you found most important? Did I not cover them in today's video? If so, I'd love to hear about them. And even if I did, let me know your take. I would love to hear about it. Leave a comment down below. Before you go, I'd also recommend checking out this video that I did on Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs, where I talk about some of the most important key takeaways that I have distilled from the biography and I'm trying to instill in my life as well. So until then, take care, and I will see you in that video. Thank you.